Hope you all had a wonderful time checking in. Welcome again to ZLMC, our Sunday morning Zen program. We got a special treat for you this morning. We have three speakers, a panel of three speakers. Barbara Barnes, who's a longtime meditator and a member of the Zen Center. She uses her experiences of working with chronic conflicts, communication styles, and ways of mourning to help people have a more centered presence when facing difficult gatherings or conversations. And so over the years, she's honed an open and transparent approach to conflict prevention and resolution by helping participants lean into disappointment, clarity, and getting in touch with the importance of connection with others. And she'll be joined by our very own Reverend Lori Shinko Snyder, a priest here at the center, and also the steward of our nonviolent communication circle. And she works full-time as a medical librarian as well, and lives with her husband, teenagers, and Parrot, who often joins us for programs, but I don't see here this morning. And we have a visitor in Grallo joining us this morning. And Greg received the lamp transmission to teach the Dharma in the Plum Village tradition in June 2018. He serves as a chaplain at the St. Patrick Hospital and the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Missoula, Montana. He's also the owner of Foundational Dialogues, Meditation and Facilitation, which is a business that practices transformative meditation for families and organizations. And you can learn more about that at foundationaldialogues.org. And they're going to be talking to us this morning about family, holidays, and practice. What could possibly go right? So been looking forward to this talk, and I'll turn the show over to you while June May gets all of you highlighted. So I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and good morning, everyone. It's nice to see everybody. Of course, when we do presentations on Zoom, sometimes we don't appear to be looking at you because we're looking at the screen of faces, etc. So just know that in your minds and how that's going to work. So Lori and Greg and I have gotten together a few times for some wonderful in-depth conversations. And after the last one we had, I thought, geez, we should have just recorded that. That would have been helpful for everyone to sort of eavesdrop in. And it may be a little bit like that today. And we want to encourage everyone to please, if you have a question or concern or comment, feel free to let us know as we move along. And we will leave time at the end for questions and comments and insights, etc. So what inspired me to what inspired me to put this group together this morning was Kelly's talk from Roshi Joan Halifax's book about edge states. And it just reminded me on a deep level, and I really sat with it for quite a while, about how many moral injuries we are sustaining right now, and that we have sustained for the last few years, and the years leading up to that, and how it's intensified, and how those moral injuries impact the way we bring our hearts to those who we grew up with or who we are in community with, and how the moral injuries that those people are suffering come into our awareness as well. You know, I mean, as though families and communities weren't messy enough. Now we've got this in the mix. As sort of a beautiful push, though, to use our practice and use our awareness in order to have a vehicle for fulfilling those vows that we sing at the end of our Sunday meditation period. So the piece of this that I've taken to speak about is about mourning. And what I've noticed over many years of working with families and organizations is that what gets in the way of entering a group without being driven by our confirmation bias and our expectations is our avoidance of mourning that our needs might not get met. And when I'm avoiding a pain in me, You are responsible for behaving and keeping me safe and keeping me comfortable, because that peace in my heart feels like a taboo somehow. And we know, don't we, from our practice, that what we try to push away definitely will persist and amplify, because it's a teacher, it's a vehicle, it's a Dharma gate. It's a Dharma gate with somebody screaming from the other side, behind door number 2, gate number 2, take me. So I want to invite you to just consider, and maybe even take notes today. What are some things that you don't want to mourn? You know, when I do facilitations and I work with groups, or when I'm doing end-of-life mediations or difficult ending facilitations, one of the things that I ask fairly early on is, what don't you want to know? What are you trying hard not to know? What question do you yearn to be asked? And what would your answer be? And that little exercise can be so helpful, because we begin to open up through side doors that grief that we've accumulated over the years of not being seen for who we are, not being appreciated, not being heard or agreed with. Those sorts of very shared and common wounds that we have with many families. You know, for example, when I'm 63, and when I was about 20, about 20, I became a vegetarian. You would think that over the years, a family might notice that. Nope. Surprise, year after year after year of family gatherings, that I wasn't eating the pork or the chicken or the steak or the turkey. And, you know, for quite a while, that became a symbol of, they don't see me and I'm not safe with them because they don't see me. And then it began to transform into, this is amazing how incapable our family system is of letting in something new. And I just let that be a study and turned it toward myself. Where do I do this? Where do I deny someone else a new beginning? Where do I deny someone else their values because my head can't get around it? So why am I saying all of this? Well, it's because many of us are going to be going into family gatherings, community gatherings, and even if we're not, we're going to be remembering those times. And so it's important for me in my practice, and I'd invite you to examine if it's important in yours, to use this as a way of learning, as a way of having more ease. And as I said in Commit to Sit yesterday morning, sort of a sneak preview, that what Lori and Greg and I were going to be talking about today is not how to change our family. So I'm sorry, and if you want to drop off now, you can. It's like when people come to Al-Anon, which is for families and friends of alcoholics, many times people come in order to find out how to make them stop drinking. And what people find out is, no, it's about how I do my work now. What have I given up in order to live with this? And what can I reclaim? What don't I know about myself that I need to know? And it's very similar with our families and our communities. So I would again invite you to, make a list of 2, maybe 3 things that you don't want to know, and that you would like to have your family or your community affirm to you, but deep down they can't. The system isn't designed that way. Their hearts aren't able to open in that way. And so just to sit with that with great tenderness and care, and a backbone that is strong and supportive of accepting this reality. And that can be a challenge. And it will benefit you, because when we show up at these gatherings, if we have done some, I don't want to say work, some reflection and contemplation beforehand, we are more in ourselves and more available to what we need to see. So here's another little trick to notice if there's some mourning that might happen. I don't know about, well, I might know about some of you, but you may, before you go to a gathering, pack in your bag all these confirmation biases. Well, I'm going to show up, and Lori's going to have her parrot chirping. I don't really have this, but Lori's going to have her parrot chirping, and Greg's kids are blah, 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 and it's going to happen, and it's always icky, and I don't like it. And then she's going to think she knows it all, and he's going to talk about that guy with orange hair, and he's going to talk about the old guy that's the president, all these sorts of things. And so we go in as, I don't know, Greg, maybe we'd say in Montana, loaded for bear and ready to spray everybody down. And so we're looking for that. And so one of the tricks is to know that each one of those biases, each one of those expectations may be informed by some mourning that has never changed and has always been the way it is. It doesn't mean that change can't occur. And if I'm contributing to believing that the system looks like this, the system can never look like this or this or this, because I'll miss it. I'm too busy trying to make it look the way I think it should and the way I resent. So another thing is expectations, right? So a lot of you have already heard me say this. I know Chris knows this saying, but expectations are premeditated resentments. So expectations are premeditated resentments. They also fly in the face of the first precept of not knowing. So how can I embrace the simple act of not knowing, the simple act of walking in as though it's new because it is, and being curious? When I embrace not knowing, curiosity just naturally springs up in me. And when curiosity springs up, it is much less likely that I'm going to experience my family's or my community's, my neighbors, my friends' words as slights. And as Greg pointed out to Lori and I as a reminder in one of our meetings, there's a part of your brain that doesn't translate between being slapped and being insulted. And so it just comes up and comes on, and all of a sudden there we are, dukes up or frozen, and the stories begin. And so it's important to know, and maybe even preload, to sit in your car, to sit in your home and picture those things happening, and then let your meditation come in as a gift. Let yourself feel your feet in your socks and your butt on the chair, and let yourself feel your hands touching one another so that you can ground back into the body. Because I'm not sure how many millions of times I've had the same thoughts about family members. And none of those thoughts ever changed anything. And when I realize that, I can change and make more room in my heart for what's happening with me. Another thing is to set, often when we leave those kinds of situations, if we've said things or been resentful, we can go away saying, oh, I screwed that up. Well, that was a fail, big F. And really what another attitude, what an alternative might be, would be to see it as an experiment and a way to learn. And at the bottom of all mourning is a missed connection. I just want to connect. And my biases, my confirmation biases, my unmet and maybe unmeetable needs, just because they were not met when I was 4 and they can't be now, those can get in the way of connection. So me waiting for you to do what you should do so that I can connect with you may not be a workable solution. It might be a good boundary in some instances. One of the things that a lot of my clients have come to when we do this sort of pre-work together for some of these big gatherings is to get curious about, what do I remember about this person that I just adore? What is their one dorky little thing that they do that I just think is just a blast? When did they touch someone tenderly? And can I keep that in mind? And are those some things that I can share? You know, so even though we don't agree with each other right now, I want you to know that I remember this about you and I just love it. Do you remember that? What was happening when that happened? So that you can enter a space of agreement about that person and you having a connection about that memory, which can be really helpful, really helpful. And another tool for helping with mourning and with preparation is to have an intention buddy. Sometimes it's called bookending. You know, you have a book holders on both ends. And so to just call someone, make arrangements and say, you know, I'm going into this. These are my intentions. This is what I really want to do. And kind of maybe get a tick check and then make arrangements to call them afterward. So that during your time together, you can be thinking of, oh, I want to make sure I say that, or this is something I want to share. And it helps the mind occupy itself in a different way so that you know that there is a beginning, a middle, and an end. So that the limbic system has less of a footing for telling you that the world is going to end and just grit and bear it and go to all the old strategies that have really only worked to barely get you by and may not contribute to your ease and to your learning in the moment. Of course, everything does when we look back on it. So I'm going to stop talking and turn it over to Lori, and thank you.
Thank you, Barb. One thing that I've always noticed in this practice of communication and relationships is needs awareness. Behind every interaction, we all have a need. And when we go into family gatherings, we have a needs that are shared. We have more shared needs than we have differences. And that's about with every situation that there is. And we have to think about, why are we going into these family gatherings? What are our needs that we're meeting by getting together with these people we call family? And sometimes it's obligation. And sometimes it's celebration. It might be acceptance, belonging, connection, good feasts and drinks, comfort, sports, fun, laughter. And sometimes they're difficult and you have to create boundaries. And as Barb says, it's good to remember those labels that we put on Uncle Ted, the alcoholic, who always says vulgar things to us. Because there's always this moment where we can change and we can go into this. And this is what Buddhism teaches us, that there is always an opportunity for a new moment to arise and for us to approach it in a new way. So I like to do this with the curiosity of my own needs and the needs of others. We go into every situation with needs. And when we get into a situation where we're with a relationship that's really challenging, often we end up yelling and shouting our own needs at each other because we're too much in pain to hear their needs. And our unmet needs are so painful that we're just shouting what we want at each other. But until we're able to take care of our own pain, then we can begin to have the curiosity for what their unmet need is that they're shouting at us. And when you can start to feel and hear those needs in others, that's when the true transformation begins. And you'll find yourself in a completely unknown territory. You don't recognize yourself. And you now see this other person and the loving connection that you can have with them. But it takes a lot of work. It's not easy. And I've stumbled and I've fallen and I've skidded my knees along the way. And you have to just kid up, put a Band-Aid on, and keep going. And I had a recent experience with this. I have a long time difficulty with my mother. We're very, very different people. And she always says she has no idea how I came out the way I am, because we're just different. We're very different. And, but we have some very shared common things that we like to do together. We like to cook together and some other things, do some artwork together and crafts. But as this pandemic, or where we are today, wherever it's going on, over the years, we've gotten painfully separated and divided. And I know this is happening in so many families. And our painful choice differences for politics ended in, just like these, I can't believe you believe that arguments from both sides. And how can you read those things? I can't read. It's not true, and here, it's hard when I come at my label of I'm a librarian. It's really hard. My sources are different than your sources. But if we're talking like this, then we're educating, we're evaluating, we're trying to fix people. And we've completely abandoned trying to have a connection. And so that's why, you kind of go back to that old adage, if you're going to Thanksgiving, you don't talk about religion, politics, down the line, where all the things that people differ on. But it happens, right? Somebody always talks about it anyway. So I went to go see my mother recently with my husband. And my mother has different political beliefs than me. And the pandemic has divided us with another political, what's become a political thing of science, where she decided not to get vaccinated. And so me working in healthcare at a hospital, I realized what a burden that is for me to be a potential carrier, because I'm in that environment. And it's all around me. And she said, it's okay. It's okay for us to come visit. And it's okay that we can take our masks off, because she just wants to see us. And she really doesn't care if she gets COVID, because she's at the dying age anyway. And that was painful. It was painful for me, but I realized that her need for connection was far greater than anything else. And so I had also that need to see her, because it'd been about 1.5 years since I'd seen her. So we went to visit, and I told my husband on the way there, don't talk about politics, don't talk about COVID, don't talk about vaccinations. Guess what? We talked about mother. He did. So you can't control people, number one. Can't fix people, can't control them. So we get there, and we're having this nice visit, and then time rolls on, and the topic comes up, and my mother shares that she's really sad because she doesn't understand why all these people are avoiding her. And that she's always been a germaphobe. She's always been someone, and I remember this very, very, all my life. She's always been someone who has taught us, you go to a potluck, you don't eat the food, there's germs in it. She's just always been, this is how I was raised. This might explain some things if you know some things about me. So just always been a germaphobe, and is extremely careful and always wears a mask, and decided not to get vaccinated because she doesn't trust that science has figured it out yet. And so she said her brothers and sisters were supposed to come visit her, and she hasn't seen them in a long time. And then when they found out she's not vaccinated, they said, we're not going to come now. And it was very painful for her. And so she went, and she started to tell us about this, and my husband started lecturing her on getting the vaccine to solve her problems. That she could go back to her spinning groups if she did this, she could see all of her family if she did this, she could join all these social situations, and I could see the pain in her. And my habitual family role with her has always been to take, here's science, here's all the science behind the research, here's the data. And I decided that role wasn't helpful anymore. And so I could see in that moment how my role wasn't helpful, and I could see her deep pain. And as my husband's lecturing her, I just said, Mom, I can see how lonely you are and how painful it must be that your brothers and sisters are not visiting you. And she just about cried. And it brought us into this different space. And she talked about that same thing. And usually when you reach into someone's need and you hit it on the dollar, you can see the pain lift off their shoulders, and you can see them go, yes, yeah, that's it. And so that was different because she wasn't used to something like that coming out of me. And I wasn't used to her being vulnerable in that space and connecting with me. I can't say it solved our relationship because we're still very different and we still do have different choices. But I realized that I can meet someone that I don't always agree with. And it gave me real hope for peace. And it takes deep patience and mindfulness. And I'm going to let that be the segue into what Greg has to say, and we'll kind of mix this up.
Thank you, Lori. Good morning, dear Sangha. Such a privilege to sit here with you all from Montana. And I know I was actually raised in Chicago area, so it's nice to be back, even if it's virtually. So about a year ago, maybe a little more, in the summer of 2020, I was visiting with a friend of mine. And I was saying, I'm just having a really hard time right now. I feel very unfocused, just tired, just don't have a lot of energy. And having trouble concentrating in general. My meditations are very kind of ethereal and unfocused, just kind of logging time in some ways, and not really interested in much. And he is like, huh, sounds like grief. And it just hit me so hard that this pandemic experience has this feeling of collective grief, of collective mourning. And things were going okay. Summer was beautiful here in Montana, except for the month of wildfire smoke. And I was home with the kids and kind of had restructured my career. I used to work as a hospice chaplain and left that job and was in between. So I had a lot of time with family, but there was this kind of underlying feeling that was going on. And what the simple observation that it sounds like grief opened up for me this ability to really see what was happening inside my body. It was something that I kind of ignored. And so I went back to the establishments of mindfulness and really began this exploration of the body and the body, re-exploration. But from a different place, it felt more critical, felt more crucial to my well-being to do that. And feel very fortunate that my body is a place where I feel grounded, and I can even, for myself, use the word safe. And I know that's not true for all people. So what I explored and experienced with this is that the body is always present. It's never anywhere else. My mind certainly can be other places in the past and the future, even lost in the present, but my body is always right here. And so it became a really wonderful place of mindfulness and of touchstone to find my body wherever it was. And what this had the effect of doing in my family system, emotional development wasn't really present. There was, for myself. So there was this kind of distance between thought and emotion and the body, with a heavy emphasis landing on being in the thought place, being in the head. And so this practice of being in the body had two fruits that came about. And one was simply being more present and being less pulled and swayed by the thoughts. I recently heard from a friend that just because you think it doesn't mean it's true. And that was a really helpful way of just coming back into the body. And the other fruit that it had was it became much easier to be aware of emotions, much easier to be in touch with emotions and to really feel them. Emotions often, they might be activated by thoughts, but they originate in the body. And then they come up into this experience of emotion. And then finally, we add on our interpretation of them and the labeling of them. So coming back to the basics of watching the emotions as they arise in the body without the story about what's happening, without the interpretation, or without the resistance to what was happening. So this exploration of the mindfulness of the body in the body, and this really settling into the body in the body, had this effect of easing some of that mourning, that grief, because I took the time to actually be with it, to feel it. Oh man, I did not want to feel it. It's uncomfortable. And I'd rather almost do anything else than sit with that pain. The pain of loss around our routine, around this fear of being sick, this fear of my family getting sick. And I went to see my parents this summer, 2021, about 8, 9 months after engaging with this practice of the body in the body. And we were all there, my kids, my wife and I, and we were having a conversation about internet usage of all things. And my son is 11, my oldest son, and when he's 13, according to the laws on books, we are no longer able to regulate his internet traffic without his consent. So he is able to create accounts and not share them with us if he wishes. And I was sharing this with my family, and my father was very upset with this law. He didn't think it was right. And so I tried to explain, the law, and really did a very unskillful job, not really connecting to his fear and his frustration around this simple thing. So I went to my familiar place of my head and just tried to explain it away. And he got very angry, like it was a personal affront to him that this law existed. And I watched inside myself the tightening happen. I watched the increased heart rate. I watched the kind of shrinking away from that anger inside and outside. Kind of watched as my arms started to come up and protect a little bit. Just watched all of these things happen. And I would love to say that I was able to be in equanimity through that whole experience. And there was an equanimity. My body was not at peace. My body was deeply distressed. But the associated feelings and accompanying story did not emerge. And so what happened was that that energy of that response emerged and lived in the body for a little while, and then it left. And my habitual way of responding to that would have been to meet that anger with my own, which is what my body was trying to do. It was trying to create that feeling of anger, to match that anger, and then to respond from that place. And I honestly was very surprised. I was watching this kind of like watching it like you might observe an animal out in the woods going about its business. It was a very surprising feeling to just watch it come and go. And later I did have to take myself for a walk. So my brother and sister-in-law and wife and I all walked around in the neighborhood because there was this residual energy that was there. The story wasn't there, but there was still this trapped energy in the body that I needed to tend to. So kind of a brisk walk and a little verbal processing with trusted people was very helpful. They were my intention buddies for that time. They were the unintentional intention buddies, but it was nice to have those trusted people to process some of that with. But I was very touched by how powerful the practice of body in the body is, because it did not. I think sometimes I know I shouldn't, but I do have this expectation that with practice, these feelings won't arise, even though there's no evidence anywhere that says that that will happen. But I still kind of have this belief that I'll just be able to meet these things without having these feelings arise. But they do, of course, because I think the only thing the Buddha may have talked about more than suffering was habit energy, just how activated we become. And finding this ability, not necessarily to feel safe in the body, but to feel safe in what the body is doing in that moment, to find that groundedness and trust and generating that energy of faith that it's okay to let this pass through. Feelings don't really live in the body for very long without a story. The story we tell can help those feelings stay as long as they want, but they don't really live more than a couple of minutes if we don't feed them. Story. And as Barb was mentioning, when our view or our identity is challenged, even if it's, maybe even especially if it's a mental construct, when that is challenged, our body mounts a fight or flight or freeze response. It just does. It treats it as though it's a physical threat. And knowing that is very helpful when I'm around somebody who has a view that's different than mine, to know that I am going to have a fight or flight response. I'm going to try to protect myself from this perceived attack. And so really finding that tenderness to just allow that energy to move, and finding some skills and strategies to dissipate that energy later, because it will reside, and it'll water that seed so that the next time we're around each other, it'll come back just as strong. So for me, having that time of reflection, of being safe in what the body is doing, having that faith that it will dissipate, has been such a gift. And I recently was looking at some of the sutras, and there's a story where the Buddha is aware that there's a conflict between his Shakya clan and a neighboring clan. And this is going to end in a violent war between the two clans. And he's had experience where he's been able to talk people out of going to war. And so this time he went and he actually sat on the battlefield right in the middle. And the armies lined up and they turned away. And the next day they lined up again and he sat down again. He did this 3 days in a row. And on the fourth day, he discerned very clearly the anger and hatred in the general's face. And he realized that it was too late, that he was not going to be able to prevent this war. He was not going to be able to prevent this harm from happening. And he had to leave. And they did end up engaging in conflict and going to war. And I imagine when I read that story, I imagine just how grief-stricken he must have been to know that these people did not have to go to war. but they did anyway, because it was too late. And this has really made me think about those expectations. What armies in my heart am I lining up before I go? What am I preparing for? What energies am I creating inside, so that when I enter into my family system, that I'm ready for battle? And really taking the time to be mindful of those, and to truly embrace this not knowing and bearing witness, so that my actions can be more loving when I engage, even if that action is non-action in that moment. And even if I'm watching the armies of my family mounting off against each other, I may not be able to keep the peace, and I may need to step away for a little while and tend to my own grief around that. So, thank you, dear Sangha.
Thank you, Greg and Lori. As you can tell, we have, and we actually did this sort of, I don't want to say inadvertently, because I believe it was the grace of Dharma, but these really have been the three tenets of the Zen peacekeepers, right? So I have found it very helpful to read those as a part of setting my intention and understanding. And a part of what we've done today is talked about, embracing not knowing, watching for those storylines, those add-ons, right? And with that, to bear witness first to ourselves and what our pain and hopes and joys and angers and armies might be doing, and what stories we might be telling. What is the joy and suffering that is here? And informed by those two, what actions can I take inside? What actions can I take responsibility for? And when I'm in the presence of what could be difficult, what actions are responsible for me? And I like from a long, long time ago, the definition responsible is the ability to respond with love. The ability to respond with love to ourselves. And so often when we get into these situations, we forget ourselves and we live in the head of our add-on stories and what they mean. And as Lori said, then it is, as Marshall Rosenberg used to say, one tragic attempt to get one's needs met after another. And we know it doesn't go anywhere. And so to watch for, what are the flags that my limbic system is lit up? What are the flags that my fight or flight has just engaged? And what can I do? How can I root? If my body isn't comfortable, can I think of a place for a few minutes where I am comfortable? Restrooms are a great place to recover one's equanimity or even look for it. So there is that. There are bathroom breaks that you can take. And I'd like to, I think we just would like to open it up now for questions or comments or insights or whatever flights of fancy you want. Please join us.
I would like to say thank you for the wonderful talk. I feel like it was particularly timely. There's really a lot of great reminders and things to think about here. I wanted to ask a little question around what Barb had said earlier about that, like, grieving can be a connection missed. And I had actually had conversations around this with friends and family not too long ago, and was looking to see your thoughts. Like, if you were to take a microscope to connection, we had a conversation around, is that really a need? How do you know when it's met? How do you know when it happens? So I thought that was an interesting conversation that I wasn't expecting to have, and looking to see if you or your panel has comments or thoughts on that as we move into that.
So I want to make sure I understand your question, Kelly. Are you asking if talking about grieving is a missed connection? I'm a little unclear, and I'm
Yeah,
want to
so
be.
how you brought up that piece that like grieving is a connection that's been missed. And it kind of took me to this conversation I had like a week ago around, is connection really a need? And how do
Ah,
you know when it's missed? And how do you know when you've really hit that with connection? Like if you were to take a microscope to it, the conversation got very interesting, and people were saying that maybe connection is just sort of a general fluff, but not really the meat of describing what actually happens in connection. So I was looking to see your thoughts, Barb, on that a little bit, or the rest of the panel, just because I was surprised I was in that space. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
well, I'd really have to look at my confirmation bias about how important connection is to be able to take a step back and look at that fairly. And I can say that in all the years that I've been doing this, um, the human spirit seems to me to need connection. And for me, because my way of coping when I was a kid was nature, I always look to nature to see if it's organic. And to me, it looks organic. To me, connection looks pretty darned important in our organic natural world. And so that's what I follow. You know, if we think of even what's holding us together is this helix of connection, right? Our DNA. So I would ask a lot more questions about that engagement that you had. That's very curious to me.
Thank you. Thank you for your thoughts on that. I appreciate that.
Lori?
Yeah, I know for myself, connection is absolutely fundamentally a need. And even when we think about people that have removed themselves from all connections, let's say even, a monk or a guru that goes into the cave for 11 years, are they really completely disconnected? I don't think so. I think they're connected to the cave, the water, the air, the clouds, and they're still connected through big mind to us. And they always come back. They don't stay in the cave forever. They come back. They come back to connect.
Thank you.
I'll jump in too. I have that same curiosity around maybe they're using the word connection differently. For me, this whole practice is about relationship. And maybe that word fits a little better. I think sometimes connection implies that it's two-way, and it isn't always. In other words, we may not get the affirmation that we're in relationship with another person in the way that we want. And that kind of affirmation may be not there. But the relationship itself is very helpful. I've recently been doing a lot of kind of loving kindness practice to myself, where I imagine myself as a suffering person, coming to myself as a compassionate person, and giving myself that kind of tenderness that I need, because sometimes that connection or that need for compassion may not be being met. So I might have to do it myself, but there's still a relationship with all those things. So maybe I'm muddying it a little bit by adding in the word relationship. But,
Thank
yeah,
you.
very, very interesting. Yeah, thank you, Kelly.
Thank you. I thought it was interesting enough. I'd bring it to this panel because I was still mulling it over myself. So thank you very much for sharing all your thoughts on that. Again, just a wonderful talk. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark.
Morning,
Yes.
everybody. I echo the last words that Kelly just said. Just a wonderful trio of comments. Thank you so much. I want to tell you about two things. First of all, about grieving as a connection that's missed. I think a lot of times I've had connections that I didn't miss, but they are gone. And so they're lost. And because they're lost, I will never get them back. I have the memories, but those folks are gone. They've passed on. And it could be a cat. It could be my mom. It could be a dear friend, but they're lost. I had them, they weren't missed. And so I think that's a little deeper for me at any rate. And maybe this is words, but words define us as human beings, how we use them. So there's that. And then about words, my first teacher, George Rosner, used to say to me, so what are you aware of? And I'd say, oh, I'm aware of the sirens outside. But what are you aware of? And he could have, and repeatedly driving me crazy. And he could have said to me, yeah, but what are you feeling? And by constantly asking me that, I finally got to the point where I said to him, I'm feeling really, really angry with you. He said, first step. George is long gone, and I do, that's a lost relationship. But I think I really learned a lot about paying attention to what I was aware of outside and inside of myself. I don't always do it. She knows that. But when I do, man, it grounds me to really know what I'm feeling.
Mhm. Mhm. Thank you, Mark. Yes. Yeah. I guess, a big part of what we're saying is to bring that awareness to yourself, to bring that awareness to what's alive and what might you be carrying. Yeah. Anybody else? Estella?
Hi, Barb. Thank you so
Hi.
much to the three of you for very insightful. I took copious notes. Thank you. And I was wishing, as I was listening to you all, to maybe hear what kind of body in the body practices are some of your go-tos that maybe we could learn from.
What a great question, Greg.
Yeah, thanks. Nice to see you, Stella. It's been a little while. Didn't recognize you in your little square there. What I started doing simply was just body scan. That was really the first step, was just really waking up that awareness by going part through part. And then what I found very helpful after I had reawakened that was just holding the whole body in awareness with all the differences that are going on at all the times. It was the reason I found it so helpful was the kind of attention that practice invited was very open and very gentle. Because I would watch my mind as it wanted to zero in on a particular part of the body. That attention would kind of focus into, oh, now I'm feeling the chair, now I'm feeling the heart rate. But it was hard at first to really open that awareness to welcome all of the experiences that the body was having. And so that became more of my go-to after kind of going through the body scan and really making the body feel alive, just holding the whole body in awareness. And the other other piece to that was critical was just inviting release of tension if it wanted to release. Sometimes there was tension that didn't want to let go, and so just let it be. But trying to find where I was adding tension and where there was just tension. So there were two different kinds. Sometimes the tension was there, and sometimes I was adding it. And so finding where I could release the stuff I was adding was helpful. But that whole body in the body practice allowed, when I had that experience with my family system, just watching the whole body, my awareness just kind of naturally opened to that experience. And so I was able to hold that kind of fight or flight habitual response in kind of total awareness at that time. Thanks.
June, did you have something?
I did. I wanted to really thank you all for a wonderful hour. And what jumped up out at me was that what you said, expectations are premeditated resentments. Such a wonderful way to encourage us to practice not knowing. That was really wonderful. So thank you very much for this.
Thank you, everyone. Bye, Greg. Greg's got to go go over to the Unitarian Church now. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you, dear Sangha. So lovely to be with you all this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Join us anytime.
Yes, and thank you, everyone, for coming
Yes.
today. I know that we're all available by email if you have more. And let's be gentle.
Wonderful talk. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone. Thanks for getting up so early, Estella.
Oh, always for you. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.